money in his pocket, confidence in his step, yet all they saw was his skin. The sales executive's sneer cut like a blade, daring him to prove he belonged. What happened next flipped humiliation into the most unforgettable revenge. In a place built to showcase wealth and prestige, a single act of arrogance set the stage for a reckoning no one expected. Strangers who came to admire cars would leave with a story they would never forget. Because this wasn't just about one man buying a car. It was about exposing the ugly truth hiding behind polished glass. The question is, who really held the power that day? Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso, had come to France for something rare: rest. For months, his days had been consumed with politics, decisions, and the weight of leading a nation. Yet, in the quiet space of his vacation, he allowed himself one indulgence: visiting a luxury car showroom to finally see and perhaps buy the new arrival that had caught his eye. It wasn't about showing off. It wasn't even about adding another symbol of power to his name. For Ibrahim, cars had always been more than machines. They were markers of progress, reminders of how far one had traveled, not just on the road, but in life. Stepping into the French showroom, he carried himself as he always did, calm, composed, dignified. To anyone who knew him, he was a soldier turned leader, a man who had risen from modest beginnings to the highest office in his country. But to the staff inside that polished glass building, he was just another black man stepping where, in their eyes, he did not belong. The showroom itself was designed to impress. Gleaming white tiles reflected the overhead lights, cars sat on display like art pieces, and the scent of leather drifted through the air. Every detail whispered of wealth, prestige, and exclusivity. Customers were greeted warmly, glasses of champagne in hand, escorted by salespeople eager to flatter and persuade. But when Ibrahim walked in, the atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly. The warmth thinned, smiles faded, conversations slowed. It was the kind of silence heavy with judgment, the kind that speaks louder than words. Ibrahim moved toward the centerpiece, the newest model on display, a car he had been following for months. The lines of its design, the engineering, the innovation, it all spoke to his appreciation for excellence. He wasn't there to gawk. He wasn't there to dream. He was ready to buy. Yet the moment he reached out, the sales executive intercepted, his voice carrying the sharpness of suspicion rather than service. "Can I help you?" The tone was flat, clipped, laced with disbelief. It was less an invitation and more a challenge, a reminder that Ibrahim's presence was out of place. Other customers glanced over, curious, sensing tension where none should exist. Ibrahim calmly nodded, asking about the car's features, but instead of receiving the polished hospitality extended to others, he was met with smirks, half-answers, and eyes that silently questioned his worth. What the salesman didn't know, what no one in that room yet realized, was that this wasn't just a man on vacation. This was the sitting president of a nation, a leader entrusted with the hopes of millions. And in that quiet, gleaming corner of France, arrogance was about to collide with truth in a way that would leave the world talking. The tension began quietly, like a shadow creeping into the room. The salesman stood with arms crossed, posture rigid, his eyes scanning Ibrahim up and down as though weighing his legitimacy. To him, this wasn't a serious buyer. This was someone wasting his time, perhaps even someone who had wandered in by mistake. He leaned against the polished hood, smirk tugging at his lips, and asked with mocking politeness, "Do you know what this costs?" It wasn't a genuine question. It was a dagger cloaked in courtesy, a message meant to remind Ibrahim that the gleaming car wasn't for people like him. Around them, other customers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, unwilling to witness the brewing confrontation. Others watched more closely, their curiosity tinged with the cruel satisfaction of seeing someone placed back in their place. Ibrahim, however, didn't flinch. Years in the military had taught him patience. Years in leadership had taught him composure. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a storm churned. He thought of the young men and women back in Burkina Faso who looked up to him as proof that dignity could rise above discrimination. He thought of the endless meetings with foreign leaders who sometimes underestimated him until he spoke with clarity and conviction. And he thought of this moment, not for himself, but for what it represented. The salesman chuckled under his breath when Ibrahim asked about financing options, not because he needed them, but because he wanted to see how the process worked in France. The chuckle was loud enough for nearby customers to hear, dripping with disdain. "Maybe you'd like to start with something smaller," the salesman said, gesturing toward the corner where entry-level models sat. His words landed, like slaps, sharp and humiliating, each comment layered insult upon insult. Ibrahim felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The centuries of Africans dismissed, underestimated, denied their humanity in spaces just like this. He could have walked out. He could have left the salesman to his ignorance. But leaving would mean allowing the arrogance to stand unchallenged. He decided to stay. As the minutes ticked by, the situation drew more attention. A few younger staff members whispered to one another, recognizing Ibrahim's face. They had seen him on the news, heard his speeches, knew he wasn't just anyone. One of them pulled out a phone, discreetly searching his name. The truth spread. Like sparks in dry grass, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into wide eyes. But the salesman, still blind in his arrogance, continued. Finally, Ibrahim asked to test drive the car. The salesman laughed outright. "This isn't possible," he said loudly, ensuring others heard. "We don't just hand the keys to anyone." His words hung heavy, dripping with humiliation. At that moment, the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Customers paused their conversations. A receptionist froze mid-keystroke, and in that silence, the balance of power was about to shift. The salesman's laughter echoed across the pristine showroom like shards of glass shattering against marble. For a moment, it was the only sound that existed, cutting, humiliating, final. He folded his arms, shaking his head with mock pity, as though Ibrahim had just told the most absurd joke of the day. But then, silence followed. A silence so heavy it pressed against the chest. The reason? Several customers had already recognized who stood before them. A young man whispered, "C'est le président du Burkina Faso." Another pulled up an image on his phone, eyes widening. The murmurs grew, and in an instant, the balance of power began to tilt. Ibrahim didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. With a calm, deliberate motion, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek black folder. He placed it gently on the hood of the very car the salesman had mocked him for admiring. The sound of paper sliding against metal was louder than thunder in that room. Inside the folder were neatly stacked documents, proof of funds, international banking statements, and an authorization letter stamped with the seal of his office. Evidence, not only of his ability to purchase the car outright, but of who he truly was. The salesman's smirk faltered as his eyes scanned the pages. The color drained from his face, arrogance dissolving into panic. Ibrahim's gaze remained steady. "You see," he said quietly but firmly enough for everyone to hear, "I did not come here to be entertained nor to be insulted. I came to buy, but now I see clearly who does not deserve my business." Gasps rippled through the crowd, phones lifted, recording every second. Where moments before there had been snickers and judgment, now there was awe, disbelief, and a deep, cutting shame that spread across the room like fire. The salesman stammered, words tripping over themselves as he scrambled to recover. Monsieur, le président, I didn't realize." His voice cracked, hands fumbling as though trying to erase the last 10 minutes. But the damage was done. What he didn't know was that silence can be a weapon, and humiliation, once exposed, can never be undone. Ibrahim straightened his jacket, his calm presence now towering over the man who had tried to belittle him. He didn't shout. He didn't insult. He simply stood there, the weight of dignity and truth making the salesman appear smaller, weaker, almost invisible. The room was no longer his stage. It was Ibrahim's. And with one final glance, Ibrahim turned, not to the salesman, but to the watching crowd, and said, "Respect cannot be bought, but arrogance always comes at a cost." The words landed like a hammer. The salesman shrank, his authority stripped bare. Customers who had chuckled moments earlier now looked away, ashamed of their complicity. Phones continued to record, every second destined to live beyond those showroom walls. The humiliation had flipped, the reckoning had come, and it was unforgettable. Ibrahim didn't stay to savor the moment. He didn't need to. His victory wasn't in buying the car, it was in reclaiming his dignity, in exposing the hidden ugliness behind polished glass. With deliberate steps, he walked toward the exit, each stride echoing louder than the salesman's laughter ever had. And then came the choice that left everyone stunned. Ibrahim could have gone through with the purchase, proven his wealth with a signature, silenced the arrogance with a transaction. But instead, he paused at the door, turned back once more, and delivered the final blow. "I came here today to celebrate my success," he said, his voice calm, unwavering. "But I will not celebrate in a place where dignity is treated as less than gold." With that, he left. The impact was immediate. Within hours, videos flooded social media. Clips of the salesman mocking, the laughter, the stammering apology, all contrasted with Ibrahim's calm composure and his final words. The story spread like wildfire, not just in France, but across Europe, Africa, and beyond. Hashtags trended. Debates sparked. News anchors replayed the footage, dissecting every second of the encounter. To some, it was a scandal, a prestigious French showroom exposed for its arrogance and prejudice. To others, it was inspiration, a reminder that power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers with dignity. For the people of Burkina Faso, the moment was deeply personal. They watched their president, not in a palace or a political rally, but in a foreign land, standing tall against the same discrimination many of them faced abroad. It was proof that he understood, that no title or position could shield him from the reality of racism, and that his response was a model of strength and pride. For Ibrahim himself, the incident was a quiet vindication. The car, he realized, was never the true reward. The real victory was turning humiliation into a lesson for the world. That respect is not granted by wealth, but by character. The salesman? He became a symbol, not of one man's ignorance, but of a system still poisoned by prejudice. The showroom scrambled to repair its image, issuing apologies, promising change. But the damage was already done. The video, immortalized online, ensured the world would never forget. And so the story ended not with a purchase, but with a question. A question that hung heavy in the minds of everyone who watched, everyone who shared, everyone who whispered about that day in the showroom. When arrogance rises against dignity, when prejudice mocks what it does not understand, who truly holds the power? The answer was already clear.